And joining me now is Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace of South Carolina. Congresswoman, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Good morning.
I want to start to get your reaction to what happened in Kansas. When you look at Kansas and South Carolina, they, in some ways, at least on their presidential vote, mirror each other. 56%, I think, for Trump in one, 55% in the other. And here you saw this resounding 59% of Kansans reject the idea of essentially getting rid of a constitutional amendment that could have led to rolling back rights to an abortion. Your reaction?
Well, I think we're seeing it on both sides of the aisle, too, the extremities of both sides. On the far left, you have folks that want abortion for any reason up until birth. And then on the far right, we have states that are trying to ensure that no abortion for any reason, including rape and incest victims and girls. And that's not okay with the electorate either. And I see it in my own district, in my own state. The vast majority of people here are okay with some guardrails, but they don't want the extremities of either side. And they're seeing states push forward with legislation, like in my state of South Carolina, there's legislation that would ban the word abortion on a website or a website server. There are folks that want to ban women from traveling out of state. There are folks, like in my state, that want to ban abortion for women who are victims of rape and girls who are victims of incest. And that's just, both sides have these extremities where the vast majority of people just are not there right now. And there has to be a place for the center on this very emotional issue.
Let me ask you this. Everything you describe about sort of the fallout from this, there was a simple way to avoid this fallout, and that was keeping Roe. In hindsight, I know you were somebody that thought you wanted to see Roe v. Wade overturned. Was that a mistake?
Well, I am staunchly pro-life, but there were issues with Roe. Even Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg had issues constitutionally, the right to privacy versus the right to equal protection under the law. You saw Joe Biden 40 years ago trying to look at doing away with it as well. And so I think that there are issues with Roe in terms of the constitutionality of it. And the overturning of it now leads it to the state legislatures in particular, but also Congress can have a role here. But the problem that we have today, Chuck, and I know that you see this every single day, are the political divisions. And because this is such an emotional issue, this is a place where we really should be working together. If you look across the pond, you look at European nations, if you're even allowed to have one, there are gestational limits. In most countries in Europe, you're looking at 12 to 15 weeks there. And there are other, exceptions that we should be looking at. We should be ensuring that life of the mother in every instance is protected. We should ensure, which is one of the reasons I was one of 8 Republicans just a few weeks ago to vote to ensure that women have access to contraceptives. There's some basic things we can be doing that all of us agree on, the vast majority of people agree on, and aren't fringy on either side of the aisle. But that's not what we're doing right now.
No, it's not. And I think that I guess I'm curious, how do you propose, because you bring up the issue that I think is maybe impossible to create, which is if you believe in this, if you view abortion through the eyes of morality, there's no such thing as moderation. So how do you legislate moderation here when neither side is comfortable with that compromise?
Well, I actually don't think it's that difficult when you're looking at it from that perspective, too. If you look at it from Congress, from our role, there can be reasonable gestational limits for most people. 75% of Americans want some guardrails. They support guardrails on abortion, whether they're pro-choice or pro-life. Only 25% are really, on the fringes of either side on this particular issue. So if you look at gestational limits, whether it's 15 weeks or 20 weeks, whether you ensure protection for fetal abnormalities, life of the mother in every instance, or certainly rape and incest victims, there are things in there that we can all agree on as Americans, and particularly in a state, whether it's South Carolina or any other state that's banning abortion altogether or trying to, then women's access to contraceptives has got to be a guarantee. We have rural counties in South Carolina without a single OBGYN doctor. How is a woman supposed to get any kind of care, health care, medical care, prenatal care, care for her infant, when those resources don't exist? And so you've got to look at it, I think, from a very, centrist perspective, which is where 75% of America is. Put in guardrails that they're comfortable with, and let's move forward. And we can do this at the federal level and give some guidance to states, or states can do it as well. But we're seeing the extremities, and we're going to continue to until Congress steps in, see extremities on both sides, which is not where the American people are.
It seems like you think Congress has to step in here. You brought up the OBGYN issue. 15 states right now want to criminalize the doctor. Okay, want to make basically, if there's a crime committed here, it's not the woman, it would be the doctor. As you know, you already talked about the problem of getting OBGYN into practicing in rural South Carolina. A lot of these OBGYNs don't want to practice in states with these restrictive laws because they don't know, they have to sit here and wait to declare an emergency to intervene medically. And so they figure, you know what, I'm going to practice medicine in a state that makes the abortion law safe. How do you do this? How do you fix this federally?
It is going to be an issue. I do think that Congress, because Roe v. Wade was overturned, that we do have an opportunity here to work together to ensure that that those things don't take place. And you can do that at the federal level with legislation, but in this particular issue, it's going to take Republicans and Democrats working together to get it in a place where you can do it in a bicameral fashion, in a bipartisan fashion, and pass legislation. And I think you can look at gestational limits that are reasonable for most Americans, but also you've got, and one of my concerns is you've got states that are going to try to ban women from traveling, that if you're raped, that you've got to report it to the police. Well, I was raped when I was 16, and it took me a week to tell my mother. By that time, any evidence would have been gone, and the violation of a woman's privacy, I can't tell you how traumatic that event was in my life. In my own home state, they want women to be required and mandated to report when they are raped. And I just can't even imagine a world where you're a girl, a teenage girl who's been raped, to have to report those things. And, Handmaid's Tale was not supposed to be a roadmap, right? Yeah. This is a place where we can be in the center, we can protect life, and we can protect where people are on both sides of the aisle. And so it's important to take that perspective, and that's the perspective that Congress should have on everything that we do. But as you know, we're just so divided. Bottom line, do you think it is bad if the Republican Party becomes the party of abortion bans? Well, I am staunchly pro-life. I have a 100% pro-life voting record. I do think that it will be an issue in November if we're not moderating ourselves, that we are including exceptions for women who've been raped, for girls who are victims of incest, and certainly in every instance where the life of the mother is at stake. And that is a position that I have staked out that's really important to me personally, but that's where the vast majority of women are in my state, and I'm going to continue to fight for those things. But we can't go to the far corners of the right or the far corners of the left, because the left wants abortion for any reason up until the birth of the child, which is insane to me and insane to most of America. So somewhere in the middle is where we've got to meet, and I do believe that Congress has a role, and I want to play a part in that role in shaping policy for the future for every American in our country. Congresswoman Nancy Mace, Republican from South Carolina. Her district basically represents a large part of Charleston, South Carolina. Congresswoman, thanks for coming on and sharing your perspective. Thank you. And joining me now is Stacey Abrams, who is the Democratic nominee for governor of Georgia. She's in a rematch with Brian Kemp, who defeated her 4 years ago very narrowly. Ms. Abrams, welcome back to Meet the Press.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Look, let's start. This lead conversation is about the impact of what we saw in Kansas and obviously post-Dobbs. How front and center do you believe the abortion debate should be for Democrats all around the country, let alone your campaign?
It is an essential conversation. It is about the freedom of women to direct their lives. It is about healthcare freedom, and it is cutting across demographics. It's cutting across ideology. It is cutting across the questions that so often dominate elections at this moment, because for women, this is a healthcare conversation. It is an economic conversation. It is also just a conversation about whether our citizenship is equal to men in this country, depending on which state you live in.
You know, it's interesting. You even seem to be arguing that it's like, look, the ups and downs of the economy, that may motivate you on one hand, but hey, these laws are longer term. I mean, do you even think abortion, in your mind, the abortion issue, almost bigger than the economy long term?
I would say that the economic vicissitudes are going to continue. And I would never underplay how important it is for us to think about putting money in people's pockets and putting a roof over their heads. But we know that for women, these abortion rights fights are about their ability to control their lives, to have the ability to participate in the economy, to have the ability to determine whether forced pregnancy is in their future. And so, yes, I would urge every voter to think about the economy is going to go up and down, but these laws, when they become solidified, change the future for every woman that you know.
I want to get some clarity on your position specifically, because you've said this. I want to put up what you said very recently on your abortion position. You said this: my intention is going to be to pass legislation that says a woman has the right to an abortion, and that right continues until a physician determines the fetus is viable outside of the body, except in the case of protecting the woman's life or health. How do you put legislation around that?
You put legislation around that by returning to what we know was the structural framework of Roe v. Wade. You do it by not setting arbitrary gestational limits, because we know that those rarely actually reflect medical decision making. This is a medical decision. And when we give it back to doctors, when we tell women and their doctors to make these choices, what we are saying is we respect the responsibility that women have and the obligation that doctors have, but that politicians are not scientists, and that we should not be setting into law these moving targets that do not reflect the reality that women face when they're sitting in that doctor's office.
Look, the person on the right who wants to see some restrictions on abortion is going to argue that even though you're not saying you're for abortion all the way up to the end of, that essentially that law would allow abortion all the way up to the end of a pregnancy. Would you want to have legislation to put guardrails on that?
The guardrails are holding the physician accountable. And that's the place where I think we've gotten a bit far afield. Mm-hmm. There is no woman who at 8 months has not cherished the notion of this pregnancy. If you have conversations with women, you know that that is one of the most difficult moments. And the reality is that to put an arbitrary date in a law devalues the pain and the tragedy of that moment. A doctor is not going to take an action that is not medically required. Mm-hmm. And what we are saying is that this is a medical decision. I understand that there are those who would feel better if we plucked a date out of the air, but we know that that is not scientifically supportable. But we also know that the tragedy of exceptions, you cannot write every exception into the law, and that is where we find ourselves today in Georgia. Brian Kemp does not permit these exceptions to be real. And in a state where we have 82 counties without an OBGYN, 64 counties without a surgeon, 18 counties without a family doctor, and 9 without a doctor at all, setting arbitrary limits that are not grounded in the reality of what women face is deeply problematic and ultimately cruel.
So this is where, I mean, you're having a science conversation and a medical conversation, which is the conversation most women are having. There's also the political reality. If you get elected governor, you're going to have probably a Republican legislature. So in order to, you may have to compromise in order to get a better law that won't be what you want. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to essentially go from what it is now to 15 weeks if that's what you're able to do as governor, because that's the legislature? You write your laws with the legislature that you have, not the one that you want.
Where we stood in Georgia prior to Brian Kemp was a 20-week ban that I also found deeply objectionable. But what Brian Kemp has done is go so far afield that 72% of women, 72% of Georgians disagree with what we have right now, which is almost a total ban. When you say 6-week ban, it's about 54%. But when you understand that it is roughly a total ban on abortion, we know that regardless of your political posture, you disagree with where we are. As someone who served in the legislature for 11 years and was lauded by both parties for my ability to navigate, I will certainly get the best law we can, but we begin making decisions based on what it should be. And then, yes, of course, you work towards what you can get. But we have to start with a governor who actually believes that a woman should have the right to control her body and to control her economic freedom.
What I'm just trying to get at here is you're not going to be rigid to the point of, if you don't get it your way, you're not going to change the law.
That's not how politics has ever worked, unless, of course, you're Brian Kemp, who believes that your extreme agenda should trump everyone else's decision-making and everyone else's needs.
Let me ask you quickly about your race. There is a pattern developing. If you just look at the polling, Raphael Warnock seems to have a steady lead on Herschel Walker. Brian Kemp and all those same polls seems to have a narrow lead on you. It does appear as if he's got a little bit of acquired some Teflon by taking on Trump. Is that making it a little bit harder to defeat him this year? Is that it's harder to make him a Trump ally?
Brian Kemp is doing an excellent job of showing that he is an extremist who has a hard right agenda that is not in the best interest of Georgia. We just lost Music Midtown, $50 million coming out of our economy because Brian Kemp weakened gun laws in Georgia at a time where guns are the #1 killer of our children, and gun violence, we are the #9 state for gun violence. What he has benefited from is having, yes, a primary that was fairly lackluster in the end, but what people are realizing and why he remains below 50% is that Georgians realize we do not have to make a choice between a strong economy and an extremist agenda. I'm the only candidate who is proposing a comprehensive plan for how we build our economy and protect our freedoms. Brian Kemp refuses to do so. And so I believe that this election, as we move into Labor Day, that people are going to continue to pay attention to his extreme position on abortion, his extreme position on guns, his extreme position on refusing to take action to help the people of Georgia when we are suffering from a healthcare crisis and a housing crisis. And that the more they pay attention, the more they will realize that his high watermark was on that primary day.
All right. Stacey Abrams, in a race that we will all be watching very closely from here. Thanks for coming on. Stay safe on the trail.
Thank you so much, Chuck.
And we should let folks know we invited Governor Kemp on. We did not receive a response. Coming up, Speaker Pelosi's visit to Taiwan sparks growing tensions between the United States and China. When we come back, I'm going to talk to Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland about that and the all-nighter that they pulled in the Senate. Stay with us.
We have to tell everyone that we just switched to Verizon's new Welcome Unlimited plan for just $30.
I've already told everyone.
Wait, did you say Verizon for just $30?
It's their best unlimited price ever.
$30? That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's from the most reliable 5G network in America.
For $30 a line, I'm switching now.
Yeah, it's easy. And you get $960 when you switch the whole family.
Wow, I gotta let my buddies know.
We're already here.
The network you want, the price you love, only from Verizon.
Nothing is coming. That's right, nothing. Zero carbon emissions. Not through offsets or credits or planting trees, but using proven technology, storing energy from the wind and the sun, turning water into fuel. Our plan goes beyond net zero, all the way to real zero, all the way to nothing.
Welcome to Allstate, where the safer you drive, the more you save. Like Rachel here.
How am I looking?
Looking good. The most cautious driver we got.
Am I there?
No, keep going.
How's that?
I'll say when.
Now? Is that good?
Lots of cars have backup cameras now, you know.
Those are for amateurs.
There we go. Like a glove, girl. Safe driving and DriveWise can save you 40% with Allstate. Click or call for a quote today.
Red Lobster's Seafood Summerfest is fire. Turn up for the grilled lobster, shrimp, and salmon trio. And our hottest summer duo, steak and lobster. It's lit. Don't miss Red Lobster's Seafood Summerfest.
Welcome back. China is choosing to react with fury over Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. The Chinese military has been carrying out some days of threatening exercises on all sides of Taiwan, which China, of course, considers part of its territory. In addition, China has cut off talks with the United States on all sorts of issues, including illegal immigration, drug trafficking, climate, and even our mid-level military back and forth, and the government sanctioned Pelosi and her family. So joining me now to dive into this a little bit is Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland. He's on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator Van Hollen, welcome back to Meet the Press. I'll be honest, looks like you guys have had an all-nighter.
Chuck, we've been here all night and we're still going on the Inflation Reduction Act.
Right.
Republicans are offering amendment after amendment to try to sabotage the bill, but I'm confident we'll get it over the finish line.
Well, let me ask you a couple questions about the bill. The biggest thing that happened was right before the bill went to a vote, and that was the parliamentarians' decision on the prescription drug benefit. Here's the bottom line. The good news for Medicare patients is that this bill should lower prescription drug costs if you're on Medicare. But now that there is no longer a part of this bill that will effectively protect those not on Medicare, Should folks who aren't on Medicare expect to see the prescription drug companies decide, well, we can't make money over here, so we're going to raise prices over there? It certainly seems like that's more likely to happen than not.
Well, Chuck, first of all, as you said, the centerpiece of this bill was finally giving Medicare the power to negotiate drug prices, and that will reduce drug prices for seniors, in addition to the fact that we have a cap of $2,000 in out-of-pocket costs. Look, I wish we'd gotten this other provision in. If we had 10 Republicans, we could get it done. We're going to have to come back to that, and we will be watching the pharmaceutical industry like a hawk. And hopefully, if they made that kind of move, we would have enough votes to respond. But I just want to stress the fact that since I've been here in the Congress, including my time in the House, we've been trying to get Medicare the power to negotiate drug prices. It looks like we're finally there.
But getting them there, it doesn't impact for the rest. What can be done? I mean, do you think you're going to have to pass a law to do this? Or are you just hoping the pharmaceutical industry, out of the goodness of their heart, doesn't raise prices for the rest of us?
Well, let me first say we may have a vote later this morning on a $30 monthly cap on insulin. And so Republicans will have a chance to join us in that. According to the parliamentarian, we're going to need their votes to get that done. So that will be some test. But look, we're going to keep at this. We want to make sure that we lower drug prices for every American, and it is an important start to get this in place for the Medicare program. And tens of millions of seniors around the country, including 1 million in Maryland who get Medicare.
Look, I invited you on because I wanted to talk some of what happened in Taiwan and what's happening right now to Taiwan. Let me just state this. Speaker Pelosi's trip, again, the Chinese chose to be outraged. This is on them, not on her. But was her trip worth it, given all the fallout?
I think it was, Chuck, because we need to be very clear that China doesn't get to dictate which U.S. officials go to Taiwan and when they go to Taiwan. As you know, we send congressional delegations frequently. A former Speaker of the House has been to Taiwan in the past. And what President Xi decided to do was manufacture a crisis over Pelosi's visit. He's got, as you know, this fall, the Communist Party Congress is coming up. He's seeking an unprecedented third term as leader of China. And this is saber rattling and, chest thumping by President Xi.
Look, it does look like that's what it is. And so I understand in the moment we're trying to de-escalate. But what do you want to see the United States, what do you want to see the Biden administration do in the next, say, 3 to 6 months to reassure the Vietnams, the Japans, the Philippines, who are nervous about what China's doing here? They're nervous about if we're going to have Taiwan's back. Do we have to send a message again that we're going to have their back?
Well, I think we've been very clear, and the Biden administration has been clear, that we are adhering to U.S. policy, which is that we recognize our one China policy, but we've also been firm and straight from the very start that we will oppose any effort to reunify Taiwan by force, by violence. And we've reassured our Japanese partners and others of that. In fact, Chuck, I think this Chinese action of putting missiles into Japan's economic zone, exclusive economic zone, is going to backfire. I think it's going to cause Japan to increase its defense spending and seek even closer military engagement and cooperation with the United States, which is already good. So I think this is going to backfire on China. Yes, we have to de-escalate. We also have to be firm in making our policy clear.
You think it's inevitable that China's going to make a run at Taiwan in the next 5 years?
I don't think it's inevitable. We need to help Taiwan make that as difficult as possible for China. And we've been doing that by supplying Taiwan with military assistance. We need to continue to do that to make Taiwan into the porcupine so that when China looks at Taiwan, it realizes that this is going to be a hell of a fight and not a winnable fight. And I do think when they look to what Putin tried to do in Ukraine, they will see how a determined people can thwart someone like a dictator like Putin, who of course thought he was going to walk into Kyiv in a matter of weeks, and that was not possible.
Look, for a long time, no U.S. official wanted to describe our relationship with China in strictly adversarial terms. But how do we not look at the cutting off of military ties, climate ties, immigration ties, all these things, and not say we're in a Cold War with China?
Well, I don't think we're in a Cold War with China yet. A lot of that depends on what China does next. And there's no doubt that President Xi has escalated China's actions against Taiwan even before the Pelosi visit, and has been more aggressive throughout the region. At the same time, we have been trying to cooperate with them on these other measures, as you say. I believe they'll be back at the table on those measures. Right. It is important that we have that military-to-military dialogue, but it is important that we also confront and check China, where it's trying to export its model of authoritarianism around the world, in Africa, the Middle East, and other places.
Senator Chris Van Hollen, it's been a long night. You were very flexible for us. I know with back and forth, you've got to get back to voting. I appreciate you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.